This is my Trek Domane SL6 2021 model. Had this bike for we're coming up at 3.5 years right now. The reason for buying it is because I wanted to get something that was a little bit more grabbable. I think we just made up a new word. Gravel capable is grabbable. But I wanted something that was a bit more capable of riding off-road, but something that was still good on the road, since I've never really lived in a place where gravel was all over the place. I always had to ride pretty far on the road before I got to any gravel. And at the time I had my giant TCR and my Wabi Classic, which only topped out at 32mm tires. Local bike shop at the time had this bike, 38mm tires. It fit me, so I figured let's go ahead and pull the trigger. Pros of this bike, there are lots. Number one, it looks absolutely sick in all black. I am a sucker for black beauties like this. It also has pretty insane tire clearance for an endurance style road bike, 38mm, which I have on there right now. And I've taken this bike off-road numerous times. You do not need a gravel bike if you have a bike like this that takes 38mm tires. Now, as far as being an endurance bike, it's not quite as agile as a crazy racy bike like the Wabi Classic that I've got right behind me. However, you start dropping the stem a little bit on this bike, put some nice carbon race wheels and some nice nice race tires, you're gonna have a relaxed endurance bike that's going to start to feel just about as agile as a proper race bike, but you're gonna get a lot more of those benefits of that endurance bike. Even though the frame, fork, and seat posts are made out of carbon fiber, it does have aluminum alloy handlebars, aluminum alloy wheels, and a nice robust mechanical Ultegra drivetrain, which means when you compare it to something like my TCR, which had carbon bars, Di2 electronics, carbon wheels, basically full carbon, this bike is going to be a lot more robust and it's going to survive a fall, since the handlebars are going to be able to take impact a lot more. And not to mention, if you do break a derailleur, since it's mechanical, it's going to be number one, easier to source since everyone's going electronic now. And number two, a mechanical style Ultegra rear derailleur is going to be about $80 or $90 last I checked. And the same style 11-speed Di2 one is going to be about $200. And if you go with the current 12-speed, you're probably going to spend north of $300. Now, I did mention the tire clearance already, but that is one of the biggest pros of this bike. You don't need to have a gravel bike, since you could just take your road bike, put gravel tires on in 38mm, and you have a gravel bike. So this bike is a great jack of all trades, and if you want to just have one bike, something like a Trek Domane is going to be absolutely awesome. Now let's elaborate on that endurance road geometry. Remember when we talked about how if you don't ride a single speed bike for a long time, you're going to lose your fitness, and because this bike, the Wabi Classic, is super racy, you might lose the flexibility and not be able to put up with that super aggressive geometry. Well, something like a Trek Domane or any other bike like it just means it's going to have a lot more relaxed geometry, meaning that you can slam the stem and make it feel a lot racy. But if you take a few weeks or a few months off the bike, since maybe if it's snowing outside and you don't like riding the indoor trainer, I hate riding the indoor trainer lately, or life just gets in the way, you can simply just raise up the handlebars, you can shorten the reach, and now you're going to have a much easier time getting back into the bike or getting back into the sport. You're not going to be forced into that super racy position. And this just keeps the bike more approachable for more casual cyclists like you and me. As something else that's on the pro list, which I didn't really think was going to be a big deal, but it actually is a really nice bonus, is it has a storage compartment in the down tube, meaning that you don't have to fuss with saddlebags. I can fit 2 Tubolito inner tubes and a multi-tool in there, meaning that the way the bike is right now, I can just get on it and go and just throw in a backpack, or if I happen to be wearing cycling kit, the bike is just going to be bare, a couple of water bottles, and that's it. Just makes it a little bit easier. The hydraulic disc brakes and the mechanical drivetrain are another big pro of this bike. I was having an issue with the front shifting, the front derailleur when you were shifting into the big ring. It was super hard, but however, as you can see right here, I just took I took the whole cable housing out, and I was able to just wire up the housing on the exterior of the bike. Doesn't look quite as cool, but I wanted to just try this out just to see if you could do it. And you can absolutely do this in a pinch. So if you're not that great at maintenance, or you don't have the tools to route everything internally through the bike, you could definitely just do something like this with some Velcro straps in a pinch, and it's going to keep the bike shifting amazingly. Ever since I did it, to shift into the big ring, like you're seeing or hearing rather right now, super, super easy, even easier than shifting on the right side. So that was a con because it was so hard to shift on the left side, but ever since replacing that, not an issue at all. Never had an issue with these brakes. I probably should bleed them at some point since it's winter and I'm not riding a lot. Knock on wood, no issues at all so far. They work. Sometimes they make noise in the rain, but carbon wheels, aluminum wheels, it doesn't matter. Rain, snow, hills, this bike can do it all. Cons of this bike, well, there's not many, but the first I could think of is that it is a carbon frame, and this really is super subjective, and it depends on how you look at things. I don't have a problem with a carbon frame. I didn't like that my TCR had carbon bars because if you drop the bike, if the bike just falls over, if you're leaning it up on a wall or something like that, you're gonna break the bars and it's just not worth it to me. So having aluminum handlebars and having a mechanical drivetrain does keep this bike more robust, and I don't think I'll have any issues with the carbon fiber cracking or breaking or doing any of those crazy things. But at the end of the day, it is still carbon fiber and is not nearly as impact resistant as steel, aluminum, or titanium. Now, the plan initially was to sell this bike and get something like a Blackheart all-road tie, but the more I think about that, that is just going to be a lot of money wasted. So my current plan is to just ride this bike, and if I don't have any issues with the frame being carbon, awesome. Just keep riding it. But if unfortunately something does happen and I do end up snapping the frame, which fingers crossed doesn't happen, going out and just getting a Blackheart all-road tie frame is going to be a lot cheaper than buying something complete from them. And I'll just be able to transfer the Ultegra 11-speed drivetrain over to that bike, which is a drivetrain that I'm really enjoying. Now, speaking of the drivetrain and the brakes, depending on how you look at this can be a con as well. The mechanical drivetrain did give me an issue, but now that I know how to replace the shifter cables and the shifter housing, not an issue at all. And I actually do have a tool. I'm gonna try to route this back internally just so it looks a bit nicer. So I'm totally okay riding a mechanical shifting bike and just replacing the cables once in a while. It's nice that you don't have to worry about charging your batteries and your shifters, and you either have one battery in the seat post or you have two batteries on your derailleurs. But a lot of people actually like that electronic shifting. Me, I could go either way, but depending on how you look at it, you are going to have to maintain this drivetrain a little bit more. And at the end of the day, it's going to be easier for most people to just charge up the batteries every once in a while. The hydraulic brakes on this bike are also amazing. They work perfectly. However, there is brake fluid running through this bike right now. So if I wanted to try to service them, or if I had a problem with them, number one, I can't do it in this room because I'll get hydraulic fluid all over the carpets, so I'd have to put a mat down. And I actually do have to keep a bleed kit back in that closet. So you just have to think about those things a little bit more than if you just had a regular style of cable actuated rim brakes or cable actuated disc brakes. While I do really love the look of it and it rides amazing, I mentioned that I'm not really into carbon frames as much. And if I didn't have anything and I could start all over again, since I know that I like bikes, I know that I've been riding bikes for pretty much all my adult life, I have no problem spending a little bit more for a titanium bike just to get that peace of mind that it's not going to rust like steel and it's not going to be as impact resist, or it's going to be more impact resistant than something like carbon fiber. Ride quality, I almost forgot to mention, this bike rides super smooth. Of course, it's an endurance bike, it's carbon, and this is the older model with the front and rear ISO-speed decouplers. The newer models don't have the front ISO-speed decoupler, which does mean that you lose about half a pound, I think, if I'm correct. That's definitely super noticeable. Between the Domane and my Wabi Classic, these two bikes ride super smooth. You can ride them on crazy New York City streets with a lot of potholes, no issues at all. So living with this bike, riding this bike, absolutely awesome. I would buy it again, but for me in particular, because I want to give titanium a try, I would buy something just like it in a titanium version, such as the Blackheart all-road tie.